Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hello and welcome to the January 31st edition of Basis Loaded with Joe Schmit. I am Joe Schmit. This episode, as always, is produced by Paige Driscoll. As I said, it's the end of January. We made it through the worst part of the year. Nothing but warm up and longer days ahead of us. What better way to celebrate than with the latest from the NDPSR report? Let's start with butter. This butter number came in at 261.13. That represents a plus 4.5 to the CME 1 week average of 256.44. We traded 2 loads on the CME, so not a lot of activity to add to the volume, but you will notice here on the NDPSR, 4.795 million pounds. So big volume. More than 1 million pounds over, and it's interesting, this is the last week that the CME butter complex spent in the mid-50s. It looks like end users kind of sniffed it out, and even though they had to pay up 4.5 over the weekly average, 261 looks like a value relative to current CME prices. Buyers took an extra 1.3 million pounds at that level. So all in all, I'd have to say very nice price for the manufacturer, able to call 4.5 cents over, and good volume as demand for butter appears strong. Up next is the blocks, 154.13. That's a plus 1.5 to the CME 1 week average of 152.80. We traded 19 loads on the CME last week. That was also at the 151-ish area. So nothing to affect basis there. 19 loads is pretty good volume at the CME. However, that volume did not show up on the NDPSR at all. And while we're talking about blocks, this 152.80 is up sharply from where blocks spent a few weeks in the low 40s, down around the 143 area. At that 143 area, we had 9-cent positive basis. Now that they take the CME up to this 153-ish neighborhood, only plus 1.5 cent basis. So well below our expected 2 to 4 cent positive basis. Basically what it tells us is that in the low 40s, buyers were okay with a 150-ish market in blocks. And we saw that basis expand. If the CME moves up to 150, buyers are still okay with that 150-ish area, although judging by the volume, they weren't too thrilled with even the 2 cent increase. Now that CME has gone up into the low 160s, we'll see what future NDPSR reports have in store for us. In barrels, 150.38. That is a 4 cent positive basis to the CME 2 week average of 146.07. So 4 cents, again, disappointing basis in both blocks and barrels this week. 12 loads traded on the CME last week in the 146-ish neighborhood, so not a lot of price discrepancy there between the CME 2 week average and the average last week, so nothing to throw basis off. It's interesting, in contrast to blocks, big volume in the barrel. Almost our expected 13.5 million pounds, coming in just short at 13.4, but first time in 4 weeks that barrel volume has been able to surpass even the 13 million pound threshold. So the story in cheese and blocks, disappointing basis on disappointing volume. In barrels, disappointing price on just okay volume. In whey, 43.65 this week, which is a little bit of a decrease week to week from last week's NDPSR reported value of 43.84. This week's number at 43.65 represents a plus 1/2 to the CME 1 week average of 42.70. So as the CME is moving higher, we're seeing the overages on the NDPSR contract somewhat. We traded 3 loads away on the exchange last week, so not a whole lot to talk about there. Big volume here on the NDPSR coming in, call it 600,000 pounds over our expected 4.5 million pound threshold. And on that big volume, of course, in whey, we're always talking about the January 13th NDPSR value of 43.04. So the manufacturer was able to sell an extra 600,000 pounds of whey at a half-cent premium to prior week's NDPSR of 43.04, maybe even a little bit more than a half cent. So the premium over prior week's NDPSR, the premium over the CME, all point to a half-cent positive basis. It'll be interesting to see, as now that the CME has achieved a new level up to the 47-48 neighborhood, if buyers on the NDPSR follow suit, or if basis turns a little bit negative and we see a decrease in volume. Only the future will tell. And then lastly, non-fat, 121.24. That's a nice price. That's positive 2, right in line with our expected 2-cent positive non-fat basis over the CME 1 week average of 119.10. We traded 10 loads on the CME, so not a whole bunch of volume on the CME to throw things off. Volume here on the NDPSR, once again falling short of the 20 million pound mark. Some 3.5 million pounds short. However, the manufacturer was able to call a nice price. However, at that elevated level, sales volume suffered somewhat. So this is the final NDPSR for the January pricing period. We have the final NDPSR release on the last day of the month, and January is behind us. All is looking good. January class 3 coming in at 15.17. January class 4, $4 over at 19.39. If you carry current CME equivalents all the way through the 4-week Feb pricing cycle, currently getting a February class 3 16.25. February class 4 maintaining that premium all the way up at 20.10. We'll see what they have in store for us in the weeks to come. Until then, on behalf of Paige and the entire EverAg Insights team, thanks so much. We'll see you next week. Bye.